and welcome. I'm Harriet Agbini. Tonight, militants attack another crude oil pipeline operated by Italy's Eni. A day after the Niger Delta Avengers, militants claimed responsibility for another strike in the region. The deplorable state of the Umuahia-Ikotepene road in Abia State becomes a source of worry for residents, especially with the onset of the rainy season. The performance of the Buhari administration in the health sector comes under focus in continuation of our review of the president's first year in office. And the World Health Organization plays down concerns over the spread of the Zika virus amid calls for the postponement of the Rio Olympics. And in business news tonight, currency trades expect cautious movement in the Naira ahead of the central bank's new guidelines for flexible exchange rate policy.
And on sports news tonight, UEFA Champions League final goes into extra time between Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid in Milan.
We'll begin tonight from the Niger Delta region, where militants have attacked another pipeline. This time, the militants attacked a crude oil pipeline operated by Italy's Eni, hours after the Niger Delta Avengers militants claimed responsibility for another strike in the region. Nigeria's oil output has fallen to a 20-year low due to the attacks on pipelines, which has compounded the impact of low oil prices on the country's economy. The Avengers, who have been targeting oil and gas facilities for the last 3 months, earlier said on Twitter that they had attacked the Nimbe Pipelines 1, 2 and 3 that pump Royal Dutch Shell's Bonny Light crude and an Agip facility, a claim that was later debunked by an official of the Bayelsa state government. Now, today's attack on the Agip facility raises another concern over the resurgence of militant attacks on the nation's oil and gas facilities. Our next report takes a look at the recent spate of attacks and its implications for the country.
Since February, the new militant group known as the Niger Delta Avengers has launched multiple attacks on oil and gas installations in the south-south region of the country. The attacks include the one on a Chevron oil facility and NNPC's gas trunk lines, both in Delta State. The latest attack is on a major pipeline operated by Italy's Eni and Agip companies in Bayelsa State. Since the new waves of attacks began, criticisms have not been in short supply, even from leaders of the South-South region, many of whom wonder what the real motives of the group are.
I'm appealing, therefore, to the so-called Niger Delta Avengers. Who are they avenging? When you have a good case, God will answer your case. But not by destroying the country economy. Not by sabotaging. We've had enough.
But for Major General Cecil Essehaigbe, a retired military officer, one way to solve the problem is by reviewing the amnesty program currently in place.
I will recommend a kind of carrot and stick system. Bring these guys on board while you do, some kind of, cope up of the area to be able to identify, where these things are coming from.
The Nigerian army isn't happy with the situation in the region and has described the group as criminals and said it's set to crush them. Because of this, the Chief of Defense Staff recently commissioned 12 refurbished gunboats for better protection of the nation's pipelines in the region.
This is not in the interest of the nation. When you bomb those facilities, those critical infrastructures, you are destroying our assets, our resources. And as a nation, this is not the way to address your grievances.
The Niger Delta Avengers says its mission is to cripple the nation's economy. The government has vowed to bring to justice the perpetrators of the attacks and protect the country's main revenue source. Many Nigerians are hoping that with the war on Boko Haram being gradually won, these attacks wouldn't degenerate into another security challenge for the country.
I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a public analyst, Professor Idoko. He's also a professor of communication at Samuel Adegboyega University. Good evening to you, Professor. Thank you so much for joining me on the news at 10.
Good evening.
So, the Niger Delta Avengers want to cripple the economy. Now, taking a look at where the proposal for the oil output for Nigeria is in terms of the 2016 budget, we have it at 2 million barrels per day. What is the implication of this constant vandalization or vandalism of government assets in terms of revenue generation and, of course, implementation of the budget?
Of course, it's impacting on the oil revenue already. And the governor of Delta State has cried out, talking about the dwindling revenue for his state, for instance, that federal allocation, internally generated revenue, today amount to just 3 billion. And they pay bills up to 7.5 billion. And that's why it's appealing to even the Avengers, or those who are responsible for the problems in the oil industry, to stay action. Of course, 6 trillion naira budget, and then all the projections are falling apart. It's going to affect everybody, including you, including myself.
But then, this is becoming a recurrence. With every president since democracy started, there's been one militant threat or the other. And now that the president seems to be winning the war against Boko Haram, we have the Niger Delta militants rearing their head. Do you think that maybe a law should be passed to kind of check such militants from coming up? Maybe if there's some form of punishment, they wouldn't see it as such a lucrative thing to go into.
Oh, well, I don't know how a nation can legislate against things like this, militancy or agitation for self-determination. It is difficult to legislate against that. But I think if there is a functional peace architecture in place, just like you have part of it, the amnesty program, something like that can at least try to ameliorate, all the agitations that are coming up every day. But I think also the government should be proactive. They know that these things are, they are coming in cycles every time. So what are the structures in place to deal with them? I think government sometimes, gets confused about what to do. Over 50 years, we have been exploiting oil. The oil industry is there with all the security challenges. And yet, we don't have anything in place, that is permanent. The Niger Delta program, was a problem, a very big problem, before it came on board. Now, I believe that the government should even continue to implement it. It shouldn't be blackmailed into backing down. Not only that, it should also continue the dialogue option. But it should not be seen as capitulating, to the militants, because that would also create more problems. The government should have absolute control over the instrument of violence. Nobody should be seen as so important to hold government to ransom. And there are criminals all over the place, parading themselves as agitators, for self-determination. I think those people should be fished out, should be smoked out, and dealt with.
Well, Professor Idoko, these people have actually come out and clearly said that they want to cripple the economy. They are enemies of the state. And so if dialogue is not going to work, what other options are available for the government?
Well, of course, dialogue should continue to be part of the process. You can't shut down dialogue. It's not done anywhere. But I'm saying also, while you're using the carrot, you must also employ the stick. Government should not be seen as having capitulated. I also think that various programs can be put in place, like the amnesty program, for instance. Even beyond the amnesty program, other programs can be designed, for the Niger Delta. If you go there, the Niger Delta is scarred, and there should be genuine, enduring program, to actually develop and empower the people. Until that is done, all these agitations will continue. And then you have pockets of interest groups and power centers in the Niger Delta, those who have a sense of disaffection with government because they have been shut down and they are being pursued in the context of the anti-corruption fight of the present administration. They believe that they should take arms against the government, and that is not to be allowed.
But then you also realize that some of these factions actually said that those who are having dialogue with the federal government do not represent them. So, since we seem to have hydra heads, so to speak, among this group, what do you think should be done now, and quickly too, so that all parties concerned can come out in a win-win situation? The Niger Delta Avengers on one hand, and the federal government on the other hand, and including the Nigerian people.
Yes, I agree with you. But in conflict analysis, there are various stakeholders that must be brought into dialogue. One, the primary stakeholders, those who are carrying arms, bombings and all that, they are just foot soldiers. They are like the errand people. Now you have the secondary stakeholders. Those ones are unseen, and some of them can be identified. Even government knows some of them. Then you have the tertiary stakeholders, those who may even be part of policy making, who will be dining and whining with the government, but they ferret information out to feed into the process, the system, and it's difficult usually to identify those ones. The government should have a functional intelligence apparatus to identify these people and make sure that when there is dialogue in place, they should be part of the dialogue. Otherwise, it's always going to be difficult. People will be making claims and counterclaims, and these are rogue groups. So government actually is responsible to identify the various groups that are representative enough so that if there is any dialogue, then at least it will be welcomed by every party.
Professor Idoko, thank you so much for joining us on News at 10.
Thank you very much.
In part 2, after the break, how well has the government fared in the health sector in the last 1 year? We'll be joined by a former president of the Nigeria Medical Association, Dr. Osaho Nabalili, to get some answers. Please stay with us.